Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Was a Rescued Bunny Hybrid? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. It'll just be for a few weeks. Please say you'll have him. We don't have the space and he needs a quiet place to recover. I can even pay Yo Dash. It's fine, Kuda. Hitoshi cut off Kuda before he could continue. It's fine, honestly it is. The only issue is that Hitoshi has zero clue on how to care for a creature other than himself, let alone a rabbit. He's read that they can be high maintenance. They need special diets, lots of attention, space to run around, they chew everything, can get sick or injured easily. Overall, Hitoshi thinks it's a bad idea to entrust him with such a fragile and dependent animal. But Kuda insists, and who was Hitoshi to question an animal expert such as he? If Kuda thought Hitoshi could handle it, then Hitoshi could handle it, probably. Besides, his soft-spoken friend rarely ever asks for favors and he's helped Hitoshi out enough times that he is morally obligated to do anything for him at this point. The phone line crackles and Hitoshi's attention is brought back to the conversation. Only if it's fine, okay? I don't want to force it on you, it's a big responsibility, especially in this case. Now that does pique Hitoshi's interest. How so? You're not giving me a rabbit animal, are you? The sarcasm practically oozes from his tone, but he's not sure Kuda picked up on it. Oh, no, he's not rabbit. In fact, it's quite the opposite. He's really sweet, it's just that he's recently been rescued from a pretty serious abuse situation. He just needs a safe place to recover and you are like the most chill person I know. That's why I asked you to house him for a while. An abuse situation? Poor little guy. If all he needs is a place to relax, it should be fine, and besides, now Hitoshi was beginning to feel an emotional obligation to take this hybrid in. How about I come to the shelter tomorrow and check him out? That being said, Hitoshi didn't want to say yes just yet. His heart immediately agreed to the chance to help out, but his brain is just worried. Worried that he wouldn't be able to help the rabbit, worried about its behavior, worried that the whole situation will just end up a disaster. Okay, perfect. I'll let him know. And how does 1 o'clock sound? Walking into the shelter is always a bit of a shock to the system. Some hybrids walked around freely, some sat in glass rooms, some in little aquariums, and some just hung around on different pieces of furniture. It was a bit chaotic in Hitoshi's opinion. He scanned the room, hoping to catch even a glimpse of something rabbit-esque. But nothing. So instead he walks to the currently unoccupied front desk and rings the desk bell. Not long after, Kuda walks out of the connected break room with the biggest smile on his face. I'm so glad you came. He's just around back. Give me a sec to wash my hands and change my apron. Oh, actually, can you come to wash your hands too? I'm not questioning your hygiene or anything, it's just that rabbits have sensitive noses and don't like strong smells like cologne or anything. It's just a precaution dash. It's alright, Kuda, honestly, I'm so out of my depth right now you could tell me to do a twirl and I'd do it. Kuda giggles at that and makes his way over to a basin. Hitoshi follows and copies what Kuda does. He couldn't help but feel nervous all of a sudden. What if he scares the rabbit? What if he makes a bad impression? What if the rabbit is a nightmare to deal with and he's just signed himself up to look after an energetic demon with baggage? Still, he follows Kuda through some staff-only doors and continues down the hall. Just before he could start thinking again, Kuda halts in front of a door and turns to face him. I'm just going to run you through a few things if that's all right. He nods. Okay, first, don't make sudden movements or raise your arms too quickly. Second, offer your hand out and wait for him to approach. Third, if he lets you, pet him on the top of the head, nowhere else at this stage. Fourth, be aware of his bandages, he's still in the first stage of his physical recovery, so just be mindful of that. And finally, keep in mind that he has just been rescued out of an abusive home. If he doesn't immediately act all friendly with you, don't take it to heart. I don't expect you to do any of this stuff, but I'm telling you just in case, okay? Before Hitoshi could even respond, Kuda was slowly turning the handle and slightly pushing open the door. Hey, Izuku, he says in a very gentle manner, even more so than his normal tone. Kuda opens the door fully and steps inside. Hitoshi cautiously moves to follow him and peeks his head around the door frame. It takes him a second, but finally he spots Izuku sitting on the floor in the farthest corner from the door. Books and paper littered around the nest of pillows he currently resides on. Now, Hitoshi had always heard the phrase, "as cute as a bunny," being tossed around, so he honestly doesn't know why he wasn't anticipating this. The first thing that Hitoshi notes is that this bun had the fluffiest green hair he had ever seen. The next thing is the floppy ears hanging on either side of his head. On top, they were the same green of his hair, with a darker green on the tips, but the inner side was a soft cream color. What Hitoshi catches next are the white bandages that peek out from beneath his baggy white shirt and black shorts. They neatly wrap around his neck, forearms and wrists, right thigh, and from what Hitoshi could see from under the pristine white socks, his left lower leg and ankle as well. They do well to cover the worse injuries, but Hitoshi could still see deep bruising running along his legs and arms, even from his neck and collarbone. It was upsetting to say the least. Once the boy acknowledges the unfamiliar man's presence, he moves from his seated position to stand on wobbly legs. From his new posture, Hitoshi could see more, like the shallow cuts along his legs and how his clothing positively hung off of him. Hitoshi was sure he was nothing but bones beneath the draping fabric, though it was hard to tell from his baby face and plush thighs. The boy brings his hands to his chest and shifts his gaze to Kuda, obviously nervous about having a stranger in his space. "This is who I was telling you about earlier. His name is Shinso Hitoshi and he's one of the best guys I know." Hitoshi would be flattered by the introduction if he wasn't so nervous. He was a sarcastic beach by nature and he didn't want to F this up. He remembers Kuda's instructions and almost robotically, slowly raises his. The boy looks at Hitoshi, then back at Kuda, then back at Hitoshi. He was afraid, but that was understandable. They stayed like that for a solid minute and a half before Hitoshi was about to put his arm down. But before he had the opportunity to, the bunny took a hesitant step towards him, then after looking at Kuda to make sure this was okay, took another step. Suddenly closer than before, Hitoshi could take in the features of his face in more detail. He was, in simple terms, positively adorable. He had freckles dusted across his cheeks and over his cute little nose. Hitoshi took note of how some of them seemed to form a diamond pattern on either cheek, which was slightly cool. His plush pink lips were slightly parted, making way for a small glimpse of pearlescent white teeth. His hair framed the sides of his face too, and despite his starved body, his cheeks held onto some baby fat, giving him a squishier look. His eyebrows were upturned, showing how nervous and unsure he was. But what enraptured Hitoshi was the bunny's eyes. Framed by luscious long lashes, the bright emerald and viridian hues bore right into Hitoshi's own lilac. He felt like he was being studied by those intelligent green eyes, like he was being judged on whether he was genuine or not. He continued to stare into those eyes until he felt a very light touch on his outstretched hand. It drew his gaze, and there he saw as the boy oh so gently took Hitoshi's much larger hand in his own and studied it for a second. He brushed his thumbs across the back of Hitoshi's hand in a contemplative motion, then gently lifted it and tentatively placed it on top of his head. The boy kept both his hands gently on top of Hitoshi's own and peeked up at Hitoshi through his bangs, checking for his reaction. Hitoshi was stunned into silence. "Why, huh? So quickly?" Hitoshi was expecting a skittering little creature who would try to bite him if he got too close. Not one to initiate contact almost immediately upon meeting him. Kuda looks on, a little shocked but secretly excited. This was going well so far. Way better than he had anticipated. "I guess all my buttering up did work. All day yesterday I was telling him how kind and considerate you are," he says from the sidelines, Hitoshi only barely glancing at Kuda. He decides to be a bit brave, and a bit daring, and slightly pats the small bunny, which he only leans into further. "Oh yeah? Well, thanks?" At the sound of his voice the bunny's ears perk up slightly. It's been about an hour or so of petting and Hitoshi's arm is starting to get tired. He doesn't want to stop petting him, not at all. He would do this all day if he could. Kuda, who had taken to doing paperwork while the two have this bonding moment, looks up from his clipboard and notices Hitoshi's distress. "All right, I hate to break this up, but it's time for Izuku to take his medication. Kuda, God bless his soul, stands up from his seated position and stands in the doorway, back pressed against the open door to keep it from closing. Hitoshi tried to gently retract his hand, but Izuku's loose grip tightened slightly and Hitoshi dare not move any further. Kuda chuckles a little and walks over to the duo. He slips his clipboard down onto the ground, then places his hands on top of Izuku's, wrapping around them slightly and pulling them off. You can see Hitoshi again tomorrow. Right now you have to take your medication and you know it makes you sleepy. Besides, Hitoshi has to go home too. We can't keep him here all night. The bunny has his eyes downcast and looks to the floor in shame at the latter statement, which in turn made Hitoshi feel guilty. Oh, it's fine, Kuda. I enjoyed being here. I'll definitely come back tomorrow, definitely. The bunny's floppy ears did perk up at that, but he still kept his eyes to the floor. All right, let's say goodbye to Hitoshi, and you know you need to rest up. After a few seconds, the rabbit nods and Kuda retracts his hands from the bunny's. He picks his clipboard up and walks back towards the door, gesturing for Hitoshi to follow. Hitoshi turns to follow, then turns back around to say goodbye. I'll come back tomorrow, Izuku, okay? The previously sullen rabbit lights up when he says his name and nods in a delicate but eager manner. The two men walk out of the room. As soon as the door shuts behind him, Kuda turns to the still stunned Hitoshi and whispers excitedly, "That went great. He must like you. I haven't seen him initiate touch like that before. You'll take him in, won't you? Please say you will." And now, after experiencing such a special moment, how could Hitoshi refuse? Besides, Izuku seems easy enough to take care of. He doesn't seem aggressive or overly skittish, just from what Hitoshi could tell. God, what has he gotten into? Oh, you should have heard him. He was muttering for a solid 2 hours after you left. He was worried he was too forward or too greedy. It's the most I've ever heard him talk in the weeks we've had him here. Oh gosh, he'll be so excited to know he's going to stay with you. Hitoshi could hear shifting on the other side of the phone. In all honesty, Hitoshi couldn't stop thinking about yesterday. He never thought he'd get so attached to a rabbit of all things, and only after meeting him for 2 hours too. Hitoshi used to be a proud cat person. Sure, he'd never owned a cat or any pet for that matter, but he related to cats on a spiritual level. So imagine his surprise that he was now committed to taking care of a rescue rabbit full-time. In the short time between yesterday's meeting and now, Kuda had given Hitoshi the rundown on everything he needs, and Hitoshi has gotten almost everything he listed. He even has an indoor tent taking up half the space in his living room. Well, it's more like a reinforced blanket fort if he's being honest, but Hitoshi's proud of it nonetheless. It's got tons of pillows in it and everything. By now Hitoshi's browser tabs were full of questions like, how do I know if my rabbit likes me? What can a rabbit eat? Where does a rabbit like to be pet? How do I make my rabbit feel safe? Etc. He had purchased all he needed for Izuku to eat a healthy diet. His fridge was now stocked with a variety of different vegetables and herbs, and a few fruits were thrown in there too. He's the most prepared for this than he has been for anything else in his life. According to Google, Hitoshi is now basically an expert in caring for a rabbit. I know this is a little sudden, but 2 of our hybrids are about to give birth, so we need Izuku's room. Do you think you'll be able to take Izuku in today? I'm really sorry, this is very short notice. What is it with Hitoshi zoning out while on the phone? But once what Kuda had just said sunk in. Today? I mean, yeah, but wouldn't that be too soon? I mean, he only met me just yesterday and all. What if he doesn't want to live with me? Suddenly, even though he's physically ready, he feels so mentally unprepared. Are you kidding? Izuku loved you. You bonded yesterday, and don't you already have all the stuff I told you to get? Anyway, I gotta go, it's hectic here. I'll pack his things and I'll drop him off at your place if that's okay? Hitoshi could tell things were getting frantic over there. He understood the rush, really he did. They needed room they didn't have, and Hitoshi was willing to house 1 hybrid. And really, it's just 1 rabbit, an abused one though. It'll be fine. Yeah, of course. You can drop him off anytime. With that, he ended the call and began his internal panic. 20 minutes later his apartment doorbell rings and he wastes no time in going to open it. There stands Kuda, looking more frazzled than usual, holding 2 plastic bags worth of things. Izuku stands next to him, however, this time he looks nervous, his gaze never leaving his feet. Kuda wastes no time depositing the bags inside, clearly in a hurry to get back to the refuge. Okay, everything is here, call me if you need any help. His medicine and medical supplies are in one of the bags and his books and notebooks are in the other. I've given you a timetable of when and how he needs to take his medicine in one of the bags. Just make sure you don't give him too many sugary things to eat, stick with bland things for now until his body gets used to a healthy amount of food. Okay, I've got to go, thank you so much Hitoshi, I owe you. And like that he's gone. Leaving just Izuku and Hitoshi standing in the doorway. After a second of gazing at the door, they look at each other. Hitoshi, being the forever awkward person, breaks the staring contest. So, house tour. Izuku nods. And there's the bathroom. Right next to it is my room, so if you need anything and I'm not in the living room, you'll probably find me in there. Izuku's just been trailing behind him through the brief tour of the apartment, taking in the details and memorizing where everything is. The apartment wasn't too big, it was a one-bedroom, one-bathroom with a storage closet, a kitchen, and a living room. They circled back to the living room and Hitoshi gestured to the blanket tent. I only have one bedroom and I figured you might have been uncomfortable with sleeping in my room, so I hope this is okay. He looks to Izuku expectantly and Izuku steps his way to examine the place he would be sleeping now, his head slightly moving around curiously as he takes in the outer appearance. He ducked his head inside it, then back out to Hitoshi, a sudden look of amazement on his face. He crawled inside fully and the tent flaps softly closed behind him. His reaction helped to ease Hitoshi's nerves. He has no idea why introducing him to the pillow fort was the most nerve-wracking part of this tour. He waits a few minutes but Izuku hasn't come out yet, so Hitoshi decides to just leave him be. His eyes drift back to the bags left on his doorstep, so he goes to retrieve them and unpack them for Izuku. The first one is his medical bag. Bandages, antiseptic agents, a bunch of pills that Hitoshi can't read the name of without getting a headache, and burn cream? Price. He takes out the timetable, checks it over, and enters some alarms into his phone to remind him he doesn't need to take anything until 7, so that gives him a solid 2 hours of rest. He moves on to the next bag and it's just got books along with 2 or 3 standard notebooks. He stacks them up and decides to leave them near the tent entrance for Izuku to grab if he wants them. Now that those are unpacked, Hitoshi has a realization. Izuku has no other clothes. Or anything else for that matter. That's not a bit of a dilemma. What the F is Izuku going to wear? Hitoshi can lend him some of his clothes, but he would literally drown in them if he wore them. He can go shopping, but he doesn't want to leave Izuku alone here on his first day. I mean, he could just order online and get him some other things while he's at it. Okay, perfect. Hitoshi grabs his laptop and maneuvers his way to gently sit on the couch, trying to move as slowly as he can and oddly mindful of the new presence occupying his living room. When Hitoshi finishes his spree, he checks the time and it's already 6. Izuku still hadn't come out yet and it was almost time for him to take his medicine. This one needs to be taken with food, so Hitoshi sets about making dinner for both the bunny and himself. Nearing the end, he guesses Izuku smelled the food as he peeks his head out from the tent flap. His eyes were droopy and his hair more tousled than usual. He probably just woke up from a nap. That means he feels comfortable here, right? I mean, you wouldn't fall asleep in a place you were uncomfortable in, right? Good morning, Hitoshi says as he begins to plate the food. That is until he hears a mumble. Good morning, it was said so softly Hitoshi almost missed it. His head whips to face Izuku, who was rubbing one eye while crawling out from the tent completely. Hitoshi couldn't help the way his heart skipped when he heard that. He hadn't heard Izuku speak before, frankly, he didn't know if he could. And the way he mumbled it, ugh, too cute. Hitoshi breaks out of his awe-induced stupor and takes Izuku's plate to the living room, not forgetting to snatch his medications and a glass of water from the counter. He sits down in front of Izuku and the bunny just watches him sleepily as his food is placed on the carpet. Hitoshi starts to reread the boxes of medication, checking and making sure he's definitely giving Izuku the right amounts. Okay, so, it says here that you need to take 2 of these and 1 of these? Is that okay, Izuku? I mean, we both know you have to take it, but like, it's okay, right? Despite Hitoshi's unsureness, Izuku just nods and holds his little bandage-covered hand out for Hitoshi to deposit the pills in. He does so and hands Izuku the glass of water as well. He realizes that the glass might be too heavy for his injured hands to hold a little too late, but Izuku just shoulders on with trembling arms as he drops the pills in his mouth with one hand, then readjusts his hold on the glass, now holding with both hands, and takes a sip. Once that's done, Izuku goes back to staring at Hitoshi. "Oh right, yup, I made you dinner, just eat as much as you can, don't worry if you can't finish the plate." Hitoshi moves to stand up to retrieve his own plate of food, but he notices that Izuku is still looking at him. He looks unsure. "What's wrong? Do you not like it?" It seems like that was the wrong question as Izuku frantically shakes his head. His eyes drift to the food and then back up at Hitoshi. "You're allowed to eat, Izuku. I made the food for you, I want you to have it." He tried to sound as encouraging as possible, and it seems to have worked as Izuku hesitantly nods his head and examines the bowl. Hitoshi takes this as his cue to continue his exit. He grabs his own dinner plate and makes his way over to the couch, not before grabbing the remote and switching on the TV. He doesn't really pay attention to whatever show comes on though, more content to watch as Izuku starts to nibble on his vegetables, utterly immersed in the colorful cartoons on screen. "Hey Izuku, we need to change your bandages before you go to sleep." A few hours have passed by now and it looks like Izuku is starting to get sleepy. His eyes have gotten droopy and his head keeps bobbing up and down in his battle to stay awake. Honestly, it's adorable to watch, but Hitoshi's gotta put his priorities in line and make sure he takes care of Izuku properly. At the mention of his name, Izuku's ears twitch up and he slowly tears his head away from the screen to face Hitoshi. He looks so cute. Hitoshi almost forgot what he was supposed to be doing. He moves to stand up and the bunny does the same, albeit more shaky and sluggish. He continues to trail behind the taller man even as Hitoshi goes to the kitchen to pick up his medicine bag, then turns back around and makes his way to the bathroom. Hitoshi sets the bag on the sink counter and then begins to unpack everything inside, examining each product label before setting them down. He finally gets to the sheet of instructions Koda left and starts to read through it, all the while Izuku stands in the middle of the room, a hand rubbing his sleepy eyes and his feet wobbling as he tries to keep himself standing. Hitoshi turns around and takes in Izuku's state before something clicks. "Oh crap. Didn't Koda mention something about his evening medicine making him sleepy? Oh shit, Izuku, I'm sorry. I totally forgot those pills make you tired. Let's sit you down, okay?" Hitoshi frantically apologizes and Izuku moves to sit on the bathtub ledge, his aching feet finally getting some relief. Let's see here. Okay, bandages first. I'm gonna start with your hands, is that okay?" Hitoshi was feeling nervous. He hadn't done something like this before. Well, he's had to take care of injuries, but not to this scale, or with as much threat of consequence. He didn't want to do it wrong, he didn't want to make things worse and hurt the bunny. Izuku seemed to share none of his worries and dutifully held out both arms. A bit stunned by his immediate obedience, Hitoshi takes an awkward second to compose himself, mentally. As carefully as he can, he gently holds Izuku by the wrist with one hand and starts to unwrap the bandages with the other. He keeps his hand steady, trying his best not to jostle any injuries or cause anything to open. Though his steady hands began to shake when he witnessed what was beneath the neat white bandages. They were now completely removed and Izuku's arm lay bare in Hitoshi's gentle grasp. Hitoshi couldn't help but stare. His outer forearm was utterly sliced up, the cuts were jagged and uneven, only tugged together by black stitches. The skin in those areas was so bruised, dark purples, blues and blacks painted themselves around the wounds, circling around his delicate wrist in a way that looked so painful. It took Hitoshi a second to regain himself. Just what the hell happened to this rabbit? He felt his blood begin to boil yet turn frigid. His joints felt so stiff that he couldn't move, but he couldn't pull his eyes away either. A gentle touch falls upon Hitoshi's hand and brings him back to the present. He tore his gaze away from the limb and met the soft viridian eyes of the rabbit. There was an unfamiliar look in the rabbit's eyes. Shame, fear, and humiliation all swirled within, but the most prominent one was the determination. It brought Hitoshi back to his senses. He needed to do this. He couldn't keep getting caught up in his own feelings. This was to help Izuku. Hitoshi nodded his head and got a hold of himself. He twisted around to the counter to grab what he needed and began to clean the cuts. It just kept getting worse. The bruises, the cuts, the burns, it was getting too much for Hitoshi to bear. It hurt his heart in a way he'd never felt before. Both arms were similarly damaged, his left arm being the worst. His medical sheet told Hitoshi that the arm had broken under the force of whatever attacked him, and that it had been stuck in a cast for a while prior. It showed too, both surgery scars and stitches littered his arm, and where there weren't stitches there were burns. Deep, angry, weeping burns that looked excruciating and uncomfortable. And Hitoshi wasn't anywhere near done. He had only cleaned and rewrapped Izuku's arms, he still had his neck and legs to go, not even counting what was underneath his clothes. Izuku had been a champion the entire time, staying as still as he could, only flinching when antiseptic was being applied or Hitoshi pressed in the wrong areas. Once he was done wrapping his arms, Izuku even held out his leg for Hitoshi to begin working on. He was so good, however, Hitoshi recommended they take a quick break. With a heavier heart, Hitoshi told Izuku to wait there and made his way out and into the kitchen. He took a good few minutes staring at a wall, just trying to process how intense and gruesome his injuries were, and how there were even more that he hadn't seen yet. Each time he thought about it, his heart twinged painfully. The bruises were the worst around his wrists. It looked like finger marks in places, large fingers. They traveled up until they increased in intensity again around his upper arms. Whatever had attacked him had tried to hold him in place so violently that it left dark purple bruising all over him. It made him sick to think about the implications of that. It made him sick to think about how the fingerprints varied in size as if by different hands, different people. He couldn't think about it anymore. Didn't want to think about it. Instead, he went to the fridge and grabbed a juice packet. It was low sugar and hydrating, pear-flavored, so Izuku should enjoy it. He took a second to steel himself before he made his way back to the bathroom. Walking in, Izuku was in the same place he had left him, sitting on the edge of the bathtub and keeping watch of Hitoshi. Just a little snack before we keep going. After opening the lid, he handed the packet to Izuku, who dutifully took it and began to sip at it hesitantly. After getting a taste of it, he started to drink it with more enthusiasm. Hitoshi busied himself by reorganizing the medical equipment and rereading the instructions. Meanwhile, Izuku just watched him, his eyes switching between being glued to the back of Hitoshi's head and his working hands. Hitoshi took a shuddery breath. "Okay, are you ready to keep going?" Hitoshi spun around to see Izuku staring at him, juice packet in both hands while his mouth takes small sips. He nods, of course, and Hitoshi kneels down on the bathroom mat. "I'll do your legs now, okay?" And with minute confirmation from a distracted Izuku, he began to take off Izuku's shin-high socks. When rereading the notes, Hitoshi found out that the socks were used as a sort of compression stocking to prevent blood clots and promote circulation following a surgery. The bandages Hitoshi had seen on his lower left leg continued down to wrap around his ankle and the arch of his foot. He couldn't see it before, but he also had bandages around his right ankle and lower shin too. He carefully unwrapped the bandages, and the skin beneath them was similar to his arms. There were cuts and claw marks around his ankles, along with hand and finger marks. Hitoshi started to feel nauseous again, but he kept going. He applied the assigned medicine and applications, then rewrapped it after cleaning around the cuts, making sure not to make it too tight or loose, and then slipping the sock back over top. He moved on to the other leg and repeated the process. Izuku had been staring at him the whole time. Not in distrust but in curiosity. He had finished his juice by now, opting to hold the empty packet in his lap. At first, he had felt a bit nervous about the situation, but now that he's gotten used to it, he's more comfortable. So much so that his eyes begin to drift away from Hitoshi's hands on his leg, to the pretty purple of his hair. He was still tired from the medication, meaning his thoughts weren't in proper order when he felt tempted to reach out and touch it. Which turns out is exactly what he did. It was soft and weightless under his fingertips, the ends were almost wispy, probably aiding his gravity-defying updo. Shinso immediately noticed the new sensation on his head but did his best not to disturb Izuku. He didn't mind Izuku playing with his hair, he found it sweet and comforting and a step in the right direction when it came to them building trust. He had finished bandaging up Izuku's legs but pretended he was still busy by messing around with the medicine packets on the floor for a few minutes. Neither said anything, both just enjoying this brief moment of sweetness before the real stress began. Izuku still had injuries on his torso, thighs and neck, and Hitoshi had no idea how to ask Izuku to remove his clothing so he could get to them. He didn't want to freak Izuku out, but then again the rabbit had been pretty compliant the whole time. It felt wrong almost, making the rabbit give him access to his more NTMT parts, but it was a necessary ask. He took a few minutes, basking in Izuku playing with his hair before deciding to continue. He could get to his neck and thigh without having to remove any clothing, yet he still felt the need to ask express permission. They were sensitive areas after all, and who knows what kind of bad memories it could stir if he just started grabbing at them. He slowly lifted his head and met the rabbit's inquisitory gaze. "Hey, Izuku? This is kind of an awkward ask, but..." He glanced at the rabbit's neck and before saying anything more, Izuku understood what he meant. The effect was instant. Panic immediately shot through his body and he began to curl in on himself, hands coming up to cover his neck, and his breathing became faster. Hey, it's okay. It's okay. We can go as slow as you need and I'll stop touching you as soon as you say so, I promise." He caught Izuku's shaky eyes and tried to emit as much sincerity as possible. He needed to calm Izuku down and fast. He didn't think he would get this scared considering how relaxed he had been beforehand. "Please. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I only want to help you get better." They held each other's gaze, Izuku scanning his face for any hint of ill intentions. Eventually, he decided he found none. His posture relaxed a bit and his breathing slowed down. However, his hands still remained in their place. "That's it, good job." Hitoshi began to praise him, hoping that gentle encouragement would help him feel more at ease. Izuku's expression remained unsure as he kept studying Hitoshi. Apparently, Hitoshi's praise worked as after a short while Izuku's hands shakily removed themselves from his neck. "Thank you, Izuku. I mean it. Thank you for trusting me." There was barely a nod from Izuku and Hitoshi shifted to stand up. "Is it okay for me to keep going? You can say no, I won't be mad." Izuku's eyes followed Hitoshi as he stood, never once leaving him even as he thought over the question. It's okay." The hesitant whisper brought an instant smile to Hitoshi's face and a tingly warmth to his heart. Hitoshi smiled softly and silently breathed out a sigh. He should have expected this. He really should have. Considering Izuku's sudden panic at being touched on his neck, Hitoshi really should have assumed the worst. But the fact is that he didn't, and now he has to face the worst unprepared. Bites and handprints overlapped each other. The bruising was so harsh it looked like they had been trying to strangle him to death or cut off his airflow completely. The bites were that of a carnivore. The sharp teeth bore deeply and gruesomely into every inch they could. Most looked like the result of an attack, but some looked like claiming marks. There were multiple, all in the area between where his neck and shoulder met. Hitoshi doesn't know a lot about the dynamics of hybrids, but he does know a few things. A bite like that is meant to claim someone as a mating partner. With how fresh they looked, with how recent his injuries looked, he felt sick. He felt the tears slide down his face before he even knew he was crying. It all just became too much. "I'm so sorry, Izuku," he sobbed, voice cracking. Izuku was confused. He thought that Hitoshi would be mad and disgusted by him. In Izuku's experience, owners don't want you unless you are pure and unclaimed. They didn't like used toys. He was so afraid that Hitoshi wouldn't want him anymore and would throw him away like everyone else did, or give him to the dogs to have fun with before returning him back to his handler. Hitoshi had been so kind to him so far. He hadn't hit Izuku yet, he fed him, he let him sleep, he asked Izuku what was okay, and now he's apologizing to Izuku. He didn't know what to do. For the first time in his life, he made his owner cry, not the other way around. How could someone do this? How could someone have been this cruel? Though Hitoshi hasn't had Izuku for long, not once has he been annoying, not once has he been aggravating. What would have caused someone to go this far? To inflict this much pain and damage upon such an adoring creature? What did he do to warrant such abuse, if he even did anything? He thought it had just been physical abuse before, but how naive he was. The fingerprints all over him, in places to restrict his movement and hold him still. the claw marks to accompany them, hooking into his flesh to prevent him from running away. And now the bites that of an animal claiming its mate, a vicious show of ownership that Izuku couldn't have fought back from. The more he thought about it, the more horrific the picture became. He couldn't stop the apologies that spilled from his lips as he buried his head in his hands. He couldn't help the way he crumbled into himself and fell to the floor. Izuku could only stare at him in shock and concern. He watched Hitoshi as he broke down in tears. Even if he couldn't comprehend why his new owner was so upset, he still felt the need to help him, to comfort him. He decided to do the boldest thing he's ever done and dropped to his knees in front of Hitoshi. From Hitoshi's position with his head buried in his hands, he could only feel as gentle arms embrace his frame. Fragile hands began to slowly rub circles along his back. Please don't cry. I am not worth your tears is what he almost said. Izuku has learned that the way to garner positive attention from an owner is to show affection and obedience to them first. He has learned that if an owner thinks you are sweet and easy, they'll be less violent and aggressive towards you. It would benefit you in the long run to swallow your fear and accept any gesture they make towards you with gratitude. With Hitoshi, it was easier. He naturally felt safe around him, in a weird, unfamiliar way. All his life he had been surrounded by predators, but Hitoshi, he was not one of those predators. He looked just as unsure of himself as Izuku was unsure of him. He wasn't pushy or forceful, he was considerate and patient. It made Izuku feel more at ease around him. Made acting sweet rather than scared easier. In terms of hybrid hierarchy, he was an Omega, you could say. His body was built as more of a stress relief toy than a machine built for survival. Which is precisely why he was separated from his best friend when he was little. Kaken was a wolf hybrid, he's pretty sure. He had a dominant personality and would frequently fight with the other strong hybrid kids. Because of his build and strength, Kaken was sold to the dogfights. And Izuku, because of his meek personality and pretty face, was sold to whoever would take him. When he wasn't being used by the owners, he was given as a treat for their more permanent pet hybrids to enjoy. Him being a bunny didn't help either. Humans seemed to have a weird fascination with rabbits, deeming them as an icon for SEC and promiscuity, but also as a symbol for cuteness and innocence. It was weird. The punishments were harsh and the rewards were even worse. He would be punished for every little thing and the rewards were more like rewards for them than they were for him. Every now and then he'd get an owner who didn't hit him, but were instead put off by his timidness and would return him back to his original handlers. It hurt every time, both the sting of rejection and the body-numbing fear of going back. He's been passed around between owners so many times that he's lost count of how many he's had in total. Over time, all their faces meshed together into one being that promised pain. His memories became blurred together in this time period. He can only remember snippets of particular moments of cruelty or kindness when triggered, but the emotions accompanied by them are a constant. The only solid memories he has is from even before he had his first owner. When he had first been taken by scary men and placed in a cell of a room with other frightened hybrid children. It was cold. It was damp. It was dark. The sounds of whimpers and cries of starving kids reverberated around the cell, creating a symphony of sound with the pitter of droplets falling from the leaky pipes. So far, everyone else had only ignored him, too caught up in their own sufferings to bother paying attention to anything else. Though that's not to say it was entirely peaceful. When it came to feeding time, it was like a switch had been flipped. The handlers would dump the scraps onto the ground and watch as they all fought for it. There was only enough for half the kids in there, and everyone knew that. If you were weak, you didn't eat at all. Izuku was the smallest and he was the newest, meaning he was the weakest. The people who kept them didn't bother to separate the predators from the prey, and lucky for Izuku, he was the only prey there. He was a recent addition to the trafficking unit, along with some blonde wolf kid who seemed to be in a constant state of annoyance, though who could blame him? Over time, the hunger drove some mad. They began to lash out and start fighting amongst themselves, claiming that if there were fewer of them, there would be more food for everyone else. The handlers would intervene before anyone died, thankfully, but they never did anything to help the injured afterwards. They just chained the aggressor to the wall and walked away. By now, it was feeding time, thus the desperate fighting commenced. Everyone began the mad scramble of waiting for the handlers to dump the sludge-like food on the ground. They stepped on each other's tails, pulled at each other's ears, and trampled on one another. Cries of pain echoed. Above the yelling of, "Move, it's mine, I'm starving." The handlers finally opened the hatch and threw the food in front of them. It took maybe 2 seconds for everything to be gone, leaving some licking at the ground, hoping to find something more, only to find none. There was less this time than there normally was. "You!" a little wild dog shouted while pointing at Izuku. Izuku was curled up in a corner, waiting it out until everyone finished and went back to their spots on the floor so he could pick at the ground in hopes of something. He visibly flinched, going wide-eyed as he stared at the boy. It was the first time he had been addressed by someone in the week he had been here. The boy's shout brought the others' attention and suddenly everyone began staring at him. "You're a rabbit, right?" he shouted at the frightened boy. At Izuku's confused expression, the boy began to stalk forward with a crazed grin. "You know, out in the wild, dogs like me eat tiny rabbits like you." Izuku now understood. He jolted up to his feet and shuffled back as far as he could to the wall. His little body shook in pure fear and adrenaline. He looked around as everyone gained an expression of clarity. Eat the rabbit for food. Suddenly it felt like the whole room had turned on him. Some began to slowly stalk towards him. A wild dog and a bear cub at the front. Izuku frantically searched for an escape, but unfortunately, in the tiny stone cell, there was none. His eyes met the wild dog's and it seemed that triggered the attack. He leapt forward, clawed hands digging into Izuku's shoulders as the force of the dog knocked him to the ground. He began to struggle, shaking, pushing and kicking at the growling boy above him in some hope to escape. He lashed out and somehow he scratched the boy on the cheek with his hand. The boy stilled and Izuku took this opportunity to run. He scrambled out from underneath but only got a few feet away before a weight crushed his body against the floor, knocking all the air out of him as the bear straddled his back. His hands reached out and clawed into Izuku's wrists, pressing them to the ground and restraining Izuku. He could only sob and cry as he was rendered helpless. He tried to buck the boy off, but he was much heavier than Izuku was. Izuku could feel his bones creaking under his weight. It felt like his ribs would snap. His heart began to hammer in his chest again as the wild dog lifted his head up by his ears. He stared at him for a second before snarling cruelly and smacking his head into the ground. "Kill this stupid rabbit," was all Izuku heard before jaws snapped around his frail neck. He was going to die, this was it. Only 7 years of life under his belt, and he was about to face such a gruesome death without being able to let out so much as a wheeze. Only he didn't. The jaws around his neck stopped their tugging and were wrenched off of him. The weight on his back was thrown off and suddenly Izuku could breathe again. Though he didn't dare look at what was happening. His fear overcame him and his body curled itself into a ball. His head hurt from being slammed into the ground and his wrists and shoulders were bleeding. It became silent all of a sudden. Deathly silent, and Izuku tensed. Footsteps pattered towards him slowly, but he didn't dare see who it was. "Oi!" Izuku didn't respond. "Hey! You still alive?" The person lifted his ear and shouted into it, causing Izuku to flinch and look at him. The blonde boy he arrived with crouched before him. His normal scowl was morphed with slight concern. Izuku's head whipped around, trying to see his attackers only to find them unconscious on the ground. His eyes shot to meet the blonde boy's bright red ones. They stared at each other for a sec before the wolf grinned at him. It was sharp and toothy, but somehow, it helped clear the fear from Izuku's system. The boy offered his hand out and Izuku hesitantly took it. "I'm Katsuki and I'm the best," he proudly announced. Izuku wholeheartedly believed him. "I am Izuku," he stuttered quietly. Katsuki leaned in a little and cupped his ears forward. "What did you say? I can't hear you." Izuku repeated his name, slightly louder than before and without stuttering, thankfully. "Deku? What a weird name." At that Izuku puffed out his cheeks in indignation. "It's Izuku, not Deku." Katsuki became amused and he grinned slyly. "I think Deku suits you better." "No, Kaken." Now it was Katsuki's turn to act affronted. "It's Katsuki. Dumb Deku, don't those big ears work?" They work just fine, Kaken. I think it's yours that doesn't work. They grinned competitively at each other and Izuku crossed his arms at Katsuki, only to wince when it aggravated his wounds. It broke their competition and Katsuki's expression became worried again. He gently grabbed Izuku's hand and led him to his corner. Katsuki was undoubtedly stronger than everyone else and was the most dominant, thus he got his own corner of the room without being crowded or disturbed by the other kids. He sat Izuku down and started to examine Izuku's wrists. Izuku just watched him in curiosity but jumped when Katsuki brought his wrists up to his mouth and liked it. "WW, what are you doing?" Izuku tried to bring his hand to his chest but Katsuki's grip remained firm. "I'm helping, idiot. Hold still and let me finish unless you want to get an infection." Izuku's nerves relaxed a little and he let Katsuki work, still watching him the whole time. Izuku couldn't help the slight blush on his cheeks as Katsuki liked him. He lapped at the blood, cleaning the wounds and the surrounding areas until they stopped bleeding. He seemed to be happy with his work and grinned, this time his teeth more bloody than before. "Let's see where else you were injured on your neck, right?" Izuku nodded slightly, more unsure about Katsuki liking around his neck. Katsuki seemed to share none of his concerns and started to lick at Izuku. Izuku tensed up as he leaned away slightly. A shiver ran down his spine and he closed his eyes. It was a weird sensation. His nerves were telling him to not let a predator lick his neck, but he honestly trusted the wolf, for some reason. Katsuki sat back and examined him again. I think your shoulders will be fine. That dog was too weak to do any real damage." He sits back against the wall next to Izuku. Him sitting cross-legged, while Izuku had his knees pulled up to his chest. Izuku snuck glances at Katsuki every now and then, and every time he looked, he saw that the boy was staring at him. Izuku gulped. "So, why did you help me?" he inquired, arms going to wrap around his knees as he peered inquisitively at the wolf. He seemed to ponder for a second, bringing a finger up to tap at his chin as if in deep thought. "Honestly, I thought you were a girl." He grinned at Izuku cheekily and Izuku's eyes widened incredulously. "What? Stop teasing me." He resisted the urge to swat at the wolf's arm as a blush spread across his cheeks. "Just kidding," he stuck his tongue out. "I did it because I like you and I hate people who pick on the weak." He gained a sort of childlike seriousness to his face as he puffed his chest out at his own response. "I see. Well, thank you, Kaken. You saved my life." He was quiet when he said it, but his gratefulness was prominent. At the praise, a small blush formed on Katsuki's face as he looked away. He grumbled out, "Don't worry about it," and they sat in silence for a second before the cold started to get to Izuku and he began to shiver. Wordlessly, Katsuki shuffled closer and leaned his body against Izuku. Wolves have a higher body temperature compared to other hybrids. "I don't mind if you use me for heat." Izuku smiled and leaned against Katsuki too. "Thanks, Kaken." The two sat there for a while on the bathroom floor. Hitoshi trying to stifle his sobs and Izuku holding his shaky frame in a gentle embrace. It was after a while that Hitoshi's heaving subsided and he sat there motionless, utterly embarrassed by his show of weakness and a harrowing feeling pooling in his gut. Izuku still stayed in his kneeling position, though taking in his new owner's trance-like state, decided to slowly remove himself from Hitoshi to give him some space. Deciding that it would be best to finish this up, he reached towards the bandages, intent to rewrap his neck and get this whole thing over with. Hitoshi noticed what Izuku was attempting to do and mentally slapped himself. Now was certainly not the time for him to be so selfish. He let out a long breath to center himself and stood back on his feet. The motion caught Izuku's attention and he stopped trying to unwrap the bandages. He looked up at Hitoshi and stood up as well. "It's okay, Izuku. I'll do it. I'm sorry that I broke down on you like that," Hitoshi says as he holds in hand out in a request for Izuku to deposit the bandages. After getting a reassuring nod from the taller man, he does so. He sits back onto the tub ledge and tilts his neck to be more accessible. He repeated the same process he had done when rewrapping all the other wounds, and once satisfied, gave Izuku a pat on the head. He had honestly done it without thinking and was going to apologize profusely, but Izuku accepted the touch. And wasn't Hitoshi so grateful that he did? He thought he had royally effed everything up by breaking down like that when he should have been focusing only on Izuku. Despite enjoying patting Izuku's fluffy hair, he also wanted to get this whole ordeal over with as soon as possible. Do you have any other injuries under your clothes? He was hesitant when he asked, not wanting to freak Izuku out as he had done before and wanting to give him a choice. The rabbit's eyes followed his and he slightly ped his head to the side. I think so. I don't think they're as bad though. Hitoshi did not take his word for it. Something told him Izuku would rather hide his injuries than admit to them. If it's okay, I just want to give them a quick look over, just in case. God, he really hoped Izuku wouldn't freak out as he had done before, but honestly, after his recent knowledge, it was a completely understandable reaction. Instead, though, Izuku hesitantly and slowly began pulling up the hem of his shirt after shakily nodding at Hitoshi. Sure enough, the injuries weren't as bad, but they made Hitoshi's heart sink even further into his stomach. Deep bruising traveled all over his torso. Some were in the shape of shoes and some were just indistinct blotches of dark colors. It looked as if he had been beaten up multiple times. Though what made his muscles constrict further was the hand and finger-shaped bruising all over his hips and waist. If he looked at them too long he was going to start crying again, he just knew it. His back was the same, though the bruising was more expansive. Now they're finally finished. After signifying he was done with the inspection, Izuku put his shirt back on, his posture far more relaxed now that it was over. How about you head to the living room and I'll clean up in here, Hitoshi said, and Izuku wasted no time in doing so. He quickly made his way to his tent and wiggled inside as quickly as he could. He was exhausted, confused, and concerned for his owner, but most of all he was just tired. He snuggled into the pillows and quickly drifted off to dreamless slumber. Hitoshi washed his hands off in the bathroom. He felt numb, his heart hurt, his head hurt, and his body felt so effing heavy. He just wanted to sleep. He made quick work of packing away all the medicine back into the plastic bag and put it in the sink cabinet for storage. Wasting no time, he exited the bathroom and speed-walked to the living room. He grabbed the remote and turned on some documentary channel as he lay down on the couch. He wasn't really watching it though, he just needed something to distract him. He didn't even notice as his eyes drifted closed and he fell into the comforting embrace of sleep. When he awoke it was to the quiet buzz of the TV and some shifting across the living room. He slowly cracks his eyes open to see Izuku sitting on the floor with his legs crossed, eyes fixated on the screen. Well, they were, until Hitoshi yawned loud enough to garner his attention and his head whipped around to look at him. Seeing that he was now awake, Izuku crawled over so that he was closer to the laying man. They stare for a second before Izuku hesitantly opens his mouth and attempts to speak, but it seemed like he was struggling with the words. "What's up, Izuku?" Hitoshi prompted. "I just wanted to ask if you are all right," shyly replied the bunny. Hitoshi gently smiles at his concern and stretches his arm out to place it on Izuku's head. Izuku accepts the affection but still gazes at Hitoshi expectantly. "I'm all right. You don't have to worry about me." The bunny pulls a face like he doesn't quite believe him, but after a particularly nice rub behind the ears, decides to drop it in favor of being pet. The clothing Hitoshi ordered online still hasn't arrived yet. There was some issue with shipping or something unimportant, but the matter of the fact is, Izuku needed something new to wear. It wasn't like Izuku was dirty or stank or anything, in fact, he was quite clean. But unfortunately, there have been a few incidents in which Izuku would spill food or water when his hands shook too much or if an injury had opened up and blood seeped out of his bandages. But in short, Izuku couldn't keep wearing the same shirt and shorts for the next few weeks until the order had arrived. In the meantime though, Hitoshi had the idea that he could wash a few of his older, and hopefully smaller, clothes and give them to Izuku to wear. He just hoped they were intact enough or didn't smell too much. Deciding to put this plan into motion one night, Hitoshi ventured to his closet and searched for any clothing he hadn't worn in a while. While Hitoshi was a minimalist by nature and often enjoyed a more decluttered environment, he had a surprising amount of clothing left from when he was a teen. A surprising amount meaning only a few t-shirts, 2 hoodies and 2 pairs of sweatpants. He knew the hoodies and sweatpants would be giant on Izuku though because they were baggy on Hitoshi when he used to wear them, but the sweatpants did have a drawstring so hopefully, they'd be able to cinch it in around the waist more so it would stay up. Hitoshi scooped up the clothing and put them in the washing machine immediately after smelling them. God, teenage boys fucking smell. Izuku was relaxing on the living room floor. He preferred laying on the floor than the couch for some reason, and as Hitoshi passed by, Izuku's ear slightly raised at the sound of his footsteps. It's been a few days of Izuku staying with him and thankfully, he now seems completely relaxed in Hitoshi's presence, rather than the slightly nervous demeanor he adorned before. Hitoshi's heart squeezed at the concept that Izuku was settling in and that he was comfortable enough to flop. Hitoshi had read online that when rabbits flop down like that, it means they are happy and relaxed. He had done a lot of research on rabbits as soon as the prospect of housing a rabbit came up, and even now. He was constantly searching up things like, how to know if your rabbit is happy, and what does it mean if my rabbit? And multiple articles on rabbit body language so that he could try and better understand Izuku. Sure, he knew that everything online was not all true, but Hitoshi would take whatever he could get. Something is better than nothing after all. Hitoshi sat on the couch and decided he'd pass the time by doing some more research on his phone. The washer signaled its finish and Hitoshi switched the clothes into the dryer. Thankfully most of the smell had washed out of them and now they mainly smelled like laundry detergent. He made his way back to the living room, deciding to inform Izuku of his idea. Izuku was in the same spot on the floor, although this time he was sitting up with his legs crossed. Izuku? The bunny turned his head to the man and tilted his head in question. I was just thinking, and you can totally say no if you don't like the idea, that I had some old clothes you could wear if you wanted to. I had ordered some online a while ago but they've been delayed so. After the words sunk in Izuku's eyes widened. Izuku didn't know that Hitoshi had even ordered anything for him to begin with, so this news was a bit of a shock. Are you sure that's all right? I don't want to be taking anything from you. You've already done so much for me. That's another thing about Izuku, he always thinks that he's being a burden on Hitoshi even when it's Hayachi offering him something. He doesn't seem to understand that Hitoshi actually wants to give him things and that he wants to help Izuku. So as always, when Izuku asks this, Hitoshi answers, I wouldn't be offering it if I didn't want you to have it, Izuku. It's just some old clothes that I never use and you need something new to wear. At that, Izuku guiltily looks down at his food and blood-stained shirt. He looks back up at Hitoshi. Thank you very much, Shin. He shyly stutters out. It's absolutely no problem, Izuku. The clothes had finally dried and Hitoshi folded them neatly and brought them to the living room. Izuku waited for him at the hallway entrance and eagerly eyed them, slightly bouncing in place. It's probably best if you try them on now to see if they fit well enough. If they don't, I can always go out and buy something from the store. Izuku wore a sort of determined expression, like, if they don't fit, we'll make them fit. It was cute, but if they weren't right, Hitoshi didn't mind spending the money on something more suitable. They moved to the living room and decided that the only thing Izuku really needed to try on was the sweatpants. He handed them over and Izuku moved to pull them up over his shorts. As expected, they were way too big. The excess fabric pooled around his feet so much that you couldn't even see them. The top opening of the pants was massive too, almost triple his waist size, though the drawstring was fully loose, so maybe they had some hope. Here, let me see. Hitoshi kneeled down in front of Izuku and gingerly took a hold of the drawstrings as Izuku still held on to the top band. Slowly Hitoshi started pulling them tighter as Izuku looked on in intrigue as the opening became smaller. Eventually, though, the strings ceased being able to pull, but luckily there was enough length there that Hitoshi could wrap them around Izuku's waist and tie them up at the front. It seemed that that was enough and they were both able to let go of the pants without them falling. They looked at each other and Hitoshi smiled in triumph. Izuku went back to his tent and fully got dressed in the new clothes. He came out wearing one of Hitoshi's black hoodies and the same sweatpants they had just tried. Izuku was holding the band of the pants up though, having to untie them to take his shorts off but needing help tying them back up. Hitoshi kneeled back down and repeated the process from before. Once done, he let the hoodie go and he noticed that, as he predicted, it was very large on Izuku. The length of it almost reached his knees and the sleeves fell over his hands completely. Hitoshi softly grasped one of the sleeves and gently began to roll them up until they were a practical length. He then did the same to the other sleeve. These are just a temporary option until more suitable clothing arrives. Come and ask me if you need me to roll your sleeves back up or retie your pants. If you give me your old clothes, I can give them a wash too. Izuku nodded gratefully and Hitoshi smiled. His plan was a success. It's been 2 weeks since Izuku started living with Hitoshi and he's decided that he wants, no needs, to do something helpful around the house. Hitoshi didn't notice it at first when a few stray books would get tidied up or how the couch pillows suddenly began to feel puffier. But he did begin to notice when his dirty dishes would miraculously end up washed and in the drying rack and Izuku would pass by him with his bandaged hands soaking wet. Hitoshi honestly had no idea how to approach the subject. He didn't want to make Izuku feel like he was doing the wrong thing, but if he kept getting his bandages wet he might get an infection or something in his wounds. So of course, Hitoshi tries to compromise by laying out some rubber kitchen gloves next to the sink each morning and a sticky note saying, "Use these please," 3, placed on top. Izuku takes notice of it the next time he goes to do the dishes and Hitoshi watches as his cheeks flush red at knowing that he'd been caught. So, for a short while things go on like that, Izuku washing up the dishes whenever he sneaks off to do so and Hitoshi noticing the occasional organized cabinet or shelf. That is until Izuku found the vacuum cleaner. Hitoshi found out that the middle of the night is when Izuku is his busiest when a sudden loud BRM echoes throughout the apartment, startling Hitoshi awake. It was short-lived and in the ringing silence that followed Hitoshi could hear the soft but hurried pats of feet retreating back to the living room. In his bleary, half-asleep state, Hitoshi chucks himself out of bed and out into the hallway. The storage closet door was fully open and the vacuum cleaner was tipped over on the floor. Hitoshi almost chuckled at the situation but realized that it probably startled Izuku really badly. He somewhat speed-walked to the living room and saw Izuku nowhere in sight, probably hiding in his tent. Hitoshi sat down outside one of the tent walls, not close enough to touch it though. "You okay, Izuku?" He could almost hear a meep from inside the fabric walls and smiled to himself. "You're not in trouble," he yawns. "Vacuum cleaners are pretty loud though, huh? It must have scared you." Hitoshi hears some quiet shuffling from inside the tent and slowly Izuku crawls out of the flaps and sits to face Hitoshi, head down. "I'm sorry." He looked like he was about to cry and that absolutely would not do. He must think he's in trouble. "I'm not mad, Izuku. Not at all. I just came out here to check that you were all right. So, are you okay?" Izuku sniffs and nods. "That's good. I probably should have warned you about that, my bad." Izuku nervously looks up and meets Hitoshi's eyes. So?" He starts after a short silence. So what is it?" "The vacuum." Izuku tilts his head. Does he seriously not even know what a vacuum is? He guesses that they were talking about the same thing and nods his head, ears flopping forward. "Well, it's a device that people use for cleaning. It scks up dirt and stuff from the floor, so that's why it was so loud." Hitoshi immediately notices how Izuku's eyes widen and shine at the description and his ears slightly perk up. But it seems the limits to Izuku's need to be useful did not stop at cleaning. For a few nights now Izuku has been watching Hitoshi cook. Just from a distance at first, peeking around from the living room or sitting behind the counter. After a while of observing Hitoshi though, it seemed like he'd know when Hitoshi would need things like salt and would slide them over so they were easier to reach. Hitoshi almost tripped over Izuku one time when he turned around to grab something and Izuku was already there, holding it and ready to hand it to Hitoshi. It seemed that Izuku was dissatisfied with such a small job though. If Hitoshi was baking something he'd try and sneakily mix the batter while Hitoshi was distracted with doing something else. Hitoshi began to assign him legitimate jobs after seeing how persistent he was in wanting to help. He lets Izuku mix things together and grab ingredients for him when requested. Sometimes it's a cute struggle as Izuku's 5 feet 1 inch self tries to reach the higher-up shelves. After a valiant effort in trying to reach it on his tippy toes, he'd either try and jump to get it or use a stool if Hitoshi hadn't already noticed and grabbed it for him. Though, Izuku is not allowed to cut things up nor handle hot items. He originally tried to, but after seeing how shaky his hands were and just the general danger, Hitoshi immediately put a stop to it and busied Izuku with doing other things. Soon enough they settle into a routine and the process of cooking goes almost rhythmically, both of them enjoying the activity and then being able to eat the fruits of their labor while cuddled up on the couch and watching TV. This leads to the next thing Hitoshi has noticed about Izuku. The rabbit seems the most distracted and content whenever he's eating. The same goes for when he's watching TV, meaning that a combination of the two at once leaves Izuku completely oblivious and uncaring of the world. His eyes remain fixed on the screen as he nibbles away at his food. Hitoshi could literally start playing with his hair or ears and the bunny would either not notice or not worry about it, which Hitoshi has taken advantage of quite a few times. He'd sit behind or next to Izuku and mess around with his ears, lifting them into an upright position or bouncing their weight in his hands, feeling them be completely limp. Because of Izuku's lop bunny status, he has little control over his ears and doesn't really rely on their positioning in order to hear, which means that Hitoshi's entertainment of himself doesn't bother him. If anything, he likes the touch. Izuku loves it most though when Hitoshi begins to mess around with his hair. For rabbit hybrids, being pet on the top of the head is the absolute best, so Hitoshi's messing around is wholly welcomed. Hitoshi notices it too by how Izuku just seems to melt into Hitoshi, either leaning back on him or into his side. His eyes narrow too and soft and low humming noises comes from his throat. It was like he was getting a good massage or something, but Hitoshi was really only messing around with his curls for fun. They'd stay like that for a while. Sometimes Izuku would fall asleep or the TV program would finish and Izuku would go to clean up the dishes after holding Hitoshi's hand. And thanks. Katsuki's been restless for a few days now, and Kirishima hasn't the slightest idea why. Well, he might have an idea. Kirishima got a call the other day from his good friend, Mina, which is a totally normal thing until she suddenly mentioned that their past classmate had recently housed a rescue. Which is, in Kirishima's opinion, super manly. He never took Shinso as the type of guy to get a pet that wasn't some kind of cat, but he's been proven wrong today. Well, who is Kirishima to judge? People always took Kirishima as a friendly dog type of person, but here he was, rehabilitating a fighting canine of dubious heritage. Well, it was close enough. And though it's been a tough process, Kirishima's really proud of Katsuki's progress. He went from being a frightened, constantly ready to attack creature made for violence to a half-calm, half-angry dog, who likes the occasional scratch behind the ear. He's made such good progress these past 4 years Kirishima's had him. But anyway, back to the main issue. Katsuki's been more grumbly than usual, which is something considering he always has something snarky to say. He's been following Kirishima around a lot more too. He never expected Katsuki to take so much interest in a rabbit of all things, but he keeps trailing Kirishima, tugging on his shirt, saying, "Let's go. I need to see him." It was a bit shocking, to say the least. The only issue was that Kirishima was worried. He felt awful for it, but he wasn't sure how it would go. Bringing Katsuki, a big canine with a mean face, to the home of a newly rescued rabbit. He was just a bit worried that Katsuki would frighten the poor thing. It was also Katsuki's persistence that created this odd feeling. He wasn't sure why Katsuki wanted to go meet him. It was really out of character for him to take interest in, well, anything other than himself. But eventually, Kirishima ran out of excuses. Katsuki had overheard it from Kirishima, who heard it from Mina, who was told by Koda that Shinso had taken in a rescue recently. A green rabbit rescue. As soon as Katsuki had heard it, his heart almost leapt right out of his throat. A green rabbit. What are the chances? Now, Katsuki is pretty sure green is an uncommon color. It's not unheard of in hybrids, but it's not very common. A green rabbit, on the other hand, that's an even rarer combination. Katsuki had only met one green rabbit in his lifetime, that being his childhood best and only friend. No matter how slim the chance may be, Katsuki would not risk it. So that's why he's been restless and unruly these past few days. Sue him. He's been trying to convey to his owner, Kirishima, his dilemma, but that shitty BSTRD won't listen. Sorry bud, I've got work to do. Not now cats, the bunny's still settling in. We can go later bud, but I'm busy right now though. This BSRD. But it seems like his constant bugging has finally worn his owner down. Tomorrow they will be going to visit the purple a-hole. Tomorrow he'd be able to make sure. To find out if this really was Deku. I don't know, man, but Katsuki has been so persistent about this. It's really odd. Kirishima was really trying to sell his case here, which wasn't easy considering the fact that Shinso also shared Kirishima's worries. I trust and respect your opinion, Kirishima, I really do, but I just can't see how this would go well. I mean, no offense, but bringing over a wolf like Katsuki might actually give Izuku a heart attack. Yeesh, I mean Kirishima can't exactly deny that, but still, he's gotta persevere, for Katsuki's sake. Hey, he's probably not a wolf. But anyway, could you, I don't know, ask Izuku about this? Who knows, but with the way Katsuki's acting, they might know each other? And God, he hopes so. If they already know each other, that would make this a lot easier. Or maybe complicate things. He hopes it's the first. But I guess it wouldn't hurt to ask. Give me a second. Kirishima can hear rustling on the other side of the line, which was promising. He turns around and flashes a quick thumbs up at Katsuki, who had been watching Kirishima from his designated spot on the couch. The intensity of his stare would have made Kirishima shiver if he wasn't used to it. Kirishima can hear Shinso speaking softly on the line. It's quiet, so he can only pick up a few things. My friend, a wolf, know him. Mita. Okay, well that, was a good sign, he thinks. He was pressing his phone so close to his ear to hear that Shinso's voice at normal volume startled him, and he almost dropped his phone. Okay, so, he said yes. When Hitoshi had first received a call from Kirishima, he had almost declined it, genuinely not recognizing the number. He and Kirishima had rarely talked before, even though they were in the same class in high school. It wasn't like they were close friends or anything. But Kirishima was a good guy and was always kind to Hitoshi, so when he answered the call and heard a chipper, "Hey Shinso," a small smile began to grow on his face. But then Kirishima mentioned that his pet wolf was pretty much obsessed with meeting his rabbit. Of course, that sent his hackles raising, and he had half a mind to insult Kirishima's intelligence and then hang up. But he didn't. He heard him out, and somehow it turns out that Izuku and Kirishima's wolf might actually know each other. Which was kind of fing wild. Now Hitoshi has an excited, nervous bunny hopping all around his apartment, running around from his tent to the front door to Hitoshi, then back to his tent again. Hitoshi had to tell him to sit down before he slipped on his socks or ran into something, but the rabbit kept on bouncing in his seat on the floor. It was kind of strange, in a good way though. Seeing Izuku this excited helped ease Hitoshi's nerves a little. It seemed like he and Kirishima were the only ones fretting, rather than the two hybrids. So Hitoshi spent the night trying to sleep, occasionally getting woken up by Izuku running to the door or window to check if it was daytime yet. He just hoped Izuku actually got any rest. As soon as Kirishima hung up the phone, he let out a major sigh of relief, a heavy weight lifting a bit from his shoulders. Hopefully, now Katsuki would be less grumpy all the time, and maybe he can make a friend too. Kirishima had tried to socialize him with his friend's pet hybrids, but Katsuki preferred to be by himself, often getting annoyed by the other's loudness or touchiness. Kirishima had just accepted that for now, at least, Katsuki would be more comfortable as a loner. But what a turn of events it was to see Katsuki, now with his usually still tail wagging and his eyes sparkling at the prospect of meeting another hybrid. It was a good feeling seeing Katsuki so happy, but he couldn't help the worry that still pooled in his gut. Ideas of what-ifs clouded his thoughts. What if the rabbit is too skittish and Katsuki gets mad or disappointed? What if it goes horribly wrong and it's all Kirishima's fault? He tried not to let his worry show, and it seemed like Katsuki didn't take any notice of him, instead choosing to stalk over to the windowsill and stare out of it, his tail wagging with the same intensity as before. It should be fine, Kirishima tries to tell himself. Katsuki's not out of control, and while he is sometimes impulsive, he's responsible. It should be fine, Kirishima repeats to himself like a mantra when he tries to fall asleep. It's finally morning, and Kirishima would be arriving with his wolf in 4 hours. Izuku was already up and at it, tidying up the living room with the speed and precision a professional cleaner would envy. The kitchen was already spotless, Izuku seeming to forget that they still need to eat breakfast and packing away everything on the counter. He was still running around when both he and Hitoshi rounded a corner at the same time, knocking into each other. Hitoshi grabbed Izuku's shoulders to steady him before he fell and could feel the energy buzzing under Izuku's skin. Hey, slow down, we've got time. He tries to be reassuring and Izuku still bounces up and down on his toes. Let's have some breakfast and relax a bit, yeah? Hitoshi keeps his hands on Izuku's shoulders and leads him to the kitchen counter, sitting him down on a stool. Izuku lets him, still bouncing on the stool in his now slightly contained excitement. Hitoshi makes them a simple breakfast, being careful not to use too many items or utensils so he doesn't ruin all Izuku's hard work. Izuku all but inhales the food when given to him and goes back to running around, this time to his tent, throwing all the pillows out of there so he can reorganize it. All the while Hitoshi just sits at the kitchen counter in resignation, slowly eating his cereal, still sleepy despite the chaos going on right behind him. Kirishima almost screams when he wakes up. The first thing he sees was Katsuki, staring down at him from his standing position beside the bed. Let's go. Now, he orders before stalking out of the room. Kirishima takes a second to reorient himself and check the time before calling out, "We still have another 3 hours." He swears he hears Katsuki growl a curse at him from another room. Kirishima quickly gets up and gets dressed. Katsuki's already in the bathroom when he enters. He caught the blonde trying to style his hair before he sees the redhead and pretends like he wasn't doing anything. Katsuki exits the room with a scowl and heads for his own, deciding to change his outfit for the 8th time. He just couldn't decide on what to wear. The closet doors almost swing off their hinges with the ferocity he rips them open and he stares at the clothing yet again, expecting them to have changed into something better since the last time he looked at them. He's never really cared about dressing to impress. Before today, there hasn't been anyone he cared about dressing up for, so now he has no clue what to wear. He tried looking through some of the magazines shitty hair had laying around but found them to be of little use. All the guys dressed in there were either way too done up or were wearing something Katsuki didn't have. He absolutely refuses to ask his owner for help either. That BSTRD has no sense of style and would probably just send Katsuki out in what he was already wearing. Which just wouldn't do. He'd spend all day there if he had to. He had to look absolutely perfect. Do you think I've cleaned enough? Should I reorganize again? Would that look be better over there or should I keep it where it is? Oh no, should I have another shower? Do you think everything smells alright? I think I should have another shower and maybe get changed again. Izuku was beginning to ramble at the speed of light. Hitoshi, who has yet to be witness to one of Izuku's muttering storms, just watched on as the usually silent rabbit almost paced a hole in the floor. It went on for a few minutes. Hitoshi only began to intervene when Izuku started to nervously pull on his hair and ears, saying stuff like, "What if he doesn't like me anymore? What if he doesn't even remember me?" Hitoshi takes Izuku's hands into his, untangling them from his hair and holding them at chest level. What if this is a bad idea? Izuku's unsure eyes locked with Hitoshi's. He could see the tears beginning to well up in his eyes. He was overthinking this. Do you want to see him? A nod. Are you sure? Another nod. Hitoshi sighs and Izuku sniffles. Izuku, he's the one that was basically begging to meet you. I don't think he's gonna care about whether some pillows are arranged in size or color order. You're thinking about this too much. Let's just calm down for a while and watch some TV. Yeah? We've got an hour and a half left and everything is basically ready. The house looks amazing, Izuku. You've done a good job. Izuku shakily nods and takes a few deep breaths. Hitoshi leads them over to the couch and sits Izuku next to him, still holding his hands. Izuku leans his head onto Hitoshi's shoulder and shuffles himself all the way into his side. Hitoshi can feel the steadily decreasing shiver from Izuku's body as he begins to relax slightly, calming down from his earlier panic. Hitoshi uses his free arm to first turn on the TV and then start to soothingly pet Izuku's head. It's a bit uncomfortable but nothing Hitoshi couldn't manage. Apparently, an hour and a half go by fairly quickly and the two are disturbed by a knock on the door. Katsuki took deep breaths as he stood before the apartment door, waiting. Kirishima leant forward to knock, his free hands grip slightly tightening on the leash attached around the wolf's neck. Katsuki knew that wearing a leash and collar was mandatory for most hybrids when brought outdoors, but that didn't mean he hated it any less. Right now, it made him feel claustrophobic and constrained. He already felt like he was going to vomit from nerves, so the leather around his neck really wasn't helping. They waited together with bated breath, Katsuki shifting on his feet and Kirishima holding on to his leash like a lifeline. Katsuki had no idea what he was gonna do. He hadn't really thought this far ahead. Now he was confronted with the possibility that he might have gotten his hopes up for nothing. Thoughts of doubt kept swirling in his mind. He didn't know what he'd do if it was the wrong rabbit. But the doorknob began to turn and suddenly Katsuki's thinking halted and his body stiffened. A body peeked around the half-open door. He was tall and lanky, Katsuki noted, with purple hair and matching eyes lined with impressive eye bags. This must be the owner. Hey Shinso, his owner waved nervously. Shinso returned the greeting politely, but then his gaze landed on Katsuki. Katsuki puffed his chest out as purple hair eyed him up. Shinso looked a little taken aback by him, and his hands somewhat pulled the door a bit closer. So, where's the little guy? Kirishima inquired, eager to break the tension between the two and get this all done with. Oh yeah, right. Shinso slowly broke his eyes away from the wolves and pushed the door till it was fully open, giving the two an opportunity to look into the apartment. Katsuki's eyes immediately caught on Green, and peeking out from behind the lanky man was a shorter, all too familiar figure. Their eyes locked. It was him. It was really him. Izuku's eyes started to sting as they filled with water. He couldn't believe it was him. The figure in front of him was different than in his memories, but the blonde hair and red eyes were unmistakable. He was taller than before, he looked stronger too, and from what Izuku could see, his body adorned some battle scars as well. But even so, it was his Kaken. Izuku's bandaged hands raised to cover his mouth as he let out a shaky sob, the action breaking the standstill. Kirishi! Izuku is suddenly tackled to the ground as Katsuki leapt forward to embrace him. He didn't care if it hurt as his bony body hit the floor, he only cared that they were finally together again. He could feel Kaken's body shake as he held him, his face buried into Izuku's bandaged shoulder. Izuku returned his hug desperately, his little hands clutching at the fabric on Katsuki's back with no intent to ever let it go. Kaken, I missed you, he whispered. Katsuki held on to him tighter. Shinso swears he felt his soul leave his body the moment Kirishima's wolf suddenly lunged forward. There wasn't even enough time for Kirishima to react before he had tackled his rabbit to the ground. Shinso raced forward, about to try and pull the wolf off or something, but then he saw Izuku's little arms snake around his back in a hug. They were hugging. Kirishima fell to his knees in relief and Shinso almost did the same. Man, that scared the shit out of me. Kirishima whispered with his hand on his rapidly beating heart. Katsuki's leash had slipped out of his grip when the wolf ran forward, and at that moment Kirishima's heart dropped. You're telling me? Kirishima nervously chuckled at that and used the wall to help push him back up. Shinso gestures for him to come inside. Welp, it's nice to see you again, Kirishima says. Shinso just laughs and shuts the door behind him. Kirishima and Shinso stand by the kitchen counter, cradling mugs of coffee in their hands as they watch the scene before them. Katsuki and Izuku had somehow moved from their spot on the floor and ended up on the couch, never leaving the other's side the whole time. Shinso had turned on the TV, but it seemed like neither was really watching it. I don't think we'll be able to leave, haha. Kirishima joked, taking a sip and throwing his gaze to the two hybrids. Probably not, seems like they are pretty intent to stay together. Shinso replied in complete agreement after seeing the reunion of the two and how close they are right now. There was a pause. Neither really knew what to say to fill the silence. I'm glad they're happy though. I've never seen Katsuki so touchy before. Kirishima whispers, somewhat catching Hitoshi by surprise. Neither for Izuku. There was another pause. That's so? What happened to him? Shinso stilled but let out a long sigh. He knew that he probably should have expected Kirishima to ask that, what with all the bandages and fading bruises on the bunny. But I'm not completely sure. All I was told when I got him was that he had just been rescued from serious abuse and needed a place to recover, but he hasn't told me anything yet and I don't want to push. Shinso propped his elbow up on the table and leaned his cheek into his open palm. The redhead wore a sympathetic expression. Seems like we're in the same boat. Katsuki was rescued from a dog-fighting ring when the whole circle got shut down. Poor thing was so scared and hurt, he wouldn't let anyone touch him or get close. That was 4 years ago now, he still doesn't like to talk about it. Shinso just frowned and looked toward the two on the couch. People can be so cruel. I wonder how they came to know each other. Such an unlikely pair, don't you think? Kirishima held a soft smile. Hitoshi understood how he felt completely. A rabbit and a wolf. Who would have thought? They took Deku away a while ago and Katsuki was almost killing himself with worry. Usually, when a kid was taken away, they didn't return, and Katsuki absolutely could not have that. He felt he needed to be with Izuku or he would die. They always stuck together in that cell. Izuku was the only one Katsuki could trust. But now he's gone and Katsuki couldn't help and pray that he'd be returned. His ears pricked up as footsteps resounded outside the metal door. They got closer and Katsuki's hopes started to raise like they always did when someone came close. He hoped that they'd swing the door open and Izuku would be brought back inside. Katsuki ran to the door and pressed up against it. The steps got closer and closer until they were right outside. Katsuki's tail wagged. Please, 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 please. The footsteps echoed away in the hall, passing by the door and receding. Katsuki slumped. False alarm, again. Katsuki shuffled back to his corner and sat down, hugging his knees to his chest. Back to waiting. There were the footsteps again, but Katsuki barely paid any attention to them. Every single time he'd heard them had been a false alarm and Katsuki had half a mind to resign himself to the notion that Deku would never come back. But the metal door slammed open, hitting the wall with a clang and giving all the kids the fright of their lives. Soon the noise stopped reverberating and the door slammed shut again. This time, though, a green lump lay on the ground, barely moving. Recognizing the green hair, Katsuki ran forward and almost slammed into Izuku's body. Deku? Deku! Katsuki shook his shoulders but got minimal response. Izuku's eyes were half open, dazed and watery. He looked like he had been crying. Katsuki noticed the absence of dirt on his body. His hair was clean and fluffy and his shirt and pants were white, not the dirt-encrusted brown everyone else wore. Deku lay limp and Katsuki recognized his state. He's been drugged up. Katsuki set about picking Deku up and bringing him to their corner, away from the curious eyes of the other hybrids. As he adjusted his hold, Deku let out a small whimper, capturing the wolf's attention. He immediately removed his grip on Deku's wrist and what he saw made his blood boil. His wrists had been rubbed raw, bruised and red. It looked like a rope had them tied together tightly. Dakaken, it hurts, Izuku barely whispered but Katsuki caught it. What the F happened? Why did they do that to him? I'm sorry, Deku. Katsuki picked him up and cradled his small body bridal style, carrying him over and sitting down with Izuku curled into his lap. They were so close now that Katsuki could feel the slight shaking of Izuku's weak body. He held him closer. What happened, Deku? No response, only Izuku's eyes slowly turning to meet his. Tell me what happened, Dash. No. Tears spilled and fell down Izuku's cheeks. He weakly shook his head and his eyes shut as tightly as they could. Katsuki felt his own lip wobble. He didn't know what to do, so instead of pushing for answers, he just curled into Izuku and held him tightly. They were startled awake by the door slamming open yet again. This time the man stomped through it and headed straight for the two after slamming it closed. Katsuki defensively hunched around Izuku. Your FNG sale fell through runt. Apparently, you were too frightened to be a good pet. The much stronger adult grabbed Izuku by his bruised wrist and dragged him up. Katsuki could only shout and scratch at him, trying his best to hold on to the bunny. I told you to just effing calm down and be good, now you've gone and effed everything up for yourself. He screamed in Izuku's face, throwing him to the floor and stomping on his stomach. Izuku could only cry out in pain. Sorry. I'm sorry. Izuku sobbed, but his crying only seemed to make the man angrier. Sorry? It's too late now, isn't it? A stray kick landed on Izuku's face and he sobbed harder, curling into a ball and holding his now bleeding nose. Seeing the blood put a look of satisfaction on the man's face, and he stepped back, sneering at the crying child. "You have no idea how much money you just lost me." And with that, he stomped back out of the room. As soon as he stepped away, Katsuki ran to Izuku. "I'll kill that Ibisudi." Katsuki growled. He was furious. Everything happened too quickly for the wolf to respond, and now he feels so useless, he couldn't even do anything. Izuku just kept crying, his hands completely covered in the same blood that was now dripping onto the floor. He shifted to sit up but winced in pain as his torso pulled. That kick must have really done a lot of damage. I'm sorry, Izuku. I couldn't do anything." Katsuki could feel frustrated tears prick at his eyes. He's such a useless wolf, he couldn't even protect a single bunny. Izuku just shook his head. It's not your fault, Keikaken." That didn't stop Katsuki from feeling any less horrible. The two cuddled close on the couch. Izuku shut his eyes contently, but Katsuki kept watch. Either he was making sure Izuku was really there or keeping watch for any danger, even though logically he knew there would be none. His arms wrapped protectively around Izuku's tiny frame, and he felt his arms squeeze back in response. "I'm never letting you go again," Izuku whispered, and Katsuki's ears twitched. That was supposed to be his line. DMN straight. Izuku and Katsuki had been cuddling on the couch together for literal hours without moving, and Hitoshi was pretty sure the both of them were asleep. Katsuki's tail had stilled its wagging, and Izuku had fallen completely limp on top of him. "What are we gonna do now? I don't think they'll want to leave each other's side." Hitoshi hummed in agreement. It was really late by now, and Kirishima had work early tomorrow. The two of them had been tossing around the idea of just letting the two stay together for the night, and after a long discussion, they decided that that would be a last resort. Although the bond the two hybrids share was clear, Hitoshi still had reservations about leaving a wolf unsupervised with his bunny overnight. Of course, he could watch them both, but he didn't know Katsuki. He wouldn't know how to handle him if anything happened. He was just worried. Kirishima understood his concern completely. He decided he would leave the decision up to Shinso. After all, it was his bunny that was at the most risk here. Of course, he had faith in Katsuki, but you never know. Shinso sighed and stood up from his seat, and Kirishima followed suit. He made his way over to the couch and wondered how exactly to go about this. Though, just as he rounded the corner, Katsuki's eyes snapped to stare at him, and Hitoshi jumped a bit. Okay, so he wasn't asleep. Kirishima luckily came forward to talk to him, so Shinso didn't have to. "Hey, Kats, it's getting really late now, and Izuku needs to rest after having such an exciting day." He slowly tried. Katsuki just nuzzled his chin further into Izuku's fluffy hair and made a show of wrapping his arms around him slightly tighter than they were before. "He is resting." Kirishima felt his sweat drop. Well, yeah, but Kirishima wasn't good at making excuses. It's not like they were lying to him, though. They were just trying to delicately separate them after reuniting after years of being apart. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea. Izuku started to stir at all the noise and slowly batted his eyes open. Hitoshi switched targets. "Aizu, it's time for them to go home." He was more suggesting rather than requesting, and Izuku turned his sleepy gaze on him. "But why?" he asked in a small and sad voice while looking up at Hitoshi with the most pleading eyes he could. Hitoshi felt his resolve wilt and crumble, and Kirishima the same. How could they have even considered pulling them apart? "Okay, well, I guess he can stay the night," he stammered, and Izuku immediately and dopily beamed at him and snuggled back into the body under him. Katsuki tucked back in happily too, and Hitoshi turned to Kirishima. "What do you want to do? I've got an extra futon if you want to stay over the night." Kirishima smiled before looking a bit disappointed. "I'd love to, man, but I've got all my stuff for work back at my place. I should probably get going now, though, early morning start and everything." Hitoshi nodded in understanding, and Kirishima went about gathering his things and putting his shoes back on by the door. "Don't hesitate to call me if anything happens or if you need advice with Katsuki. He's pretty much chill most of the time, a little grumpy if anything, but that's about it." Hitoshi nodded, and Kirishima went to leave. "See ya later, Shinso." "Yes, see ya." It was actually way easier than expected to look after the two hybrids together. The wolf didn't really do much other than follow Izuku around everywhere he went like a puppy and observe the apartment, and Izuku just happily chatted away at him when the two weren't quietly cuddling. It was very cute and sweet, and Hitoshi felt like his heart was constantly being squeezed by how wholesome it all was. Katsuki didn't really speak much, Hitoshi noticed. He more so relied on vague grunts and body language to get his point across, contrasting Izuku, who made sure to explain everything with as many words as possible so there was no possible confusion. What an adorable dynamic. Although, Hitoshi felt like he was constantly being watched and judged by the wolf. He would stare, borderline glare, at the man as often as he could and didn't care if he noticed. Hitoshi knew he was trying to judge his character. The wolf was probably aware of how shitty Izuku's life was before and wanted to make sure he was fine. Hitoshi's theory was confirmed when he overheard the two talking to each other from within Izuku's tent. "What's this owner like?" Katsuki bluntly asked, and Izuku stopped midway through his rambling. He paused and Hitoshi held his breath. He desperately wanted to know what Izuku thought of him, but he's never had the guts to ask. "Please be good, please be good, please be. That he's really great. He cares about me, I think," Izuku says after a beat, a clear smile in his voice. Hitoshi sighed in relief. "Has he hit you yet?" Katsuki continued interrogating. "Not at all," Izuku denied. "Has he done anything else?" This caused Izuku to pause again. He took a deep breath. "No, he hasn't. He's really kind, and I don't think he's the type to do something like that." He was quiet but earnest. He fully believed what he said. "You sure? Humans are all the same. They always want something from you in the end." The wolf gruffly said. He was clearly extremely protective of the bunny, but that didn't stop Hitoshi from feeling his heart sink. "What about Kirishima then?" the blonde stilled as Izuku pointed out his hypocrisy. He's different," Katsuki muttered. "Then why can't you believe that mine is different too? He has treated me very well and I am very grateful to him." Katsuki paused in thought, mulling over Izuku's answer. "That's fine. You don't need to worry about me so much. I'm safe now." "All right," Katsuki grumbled and Izuku lightly giggled. Hitoshi felt the weight on his chest lighten. Izuku lightly yawned and some shuffling was heard in the tent. "I'm sleepy." "Then sleep, Deku. But I'm afraid that you'll be gone when I wake up. I want to stay with you." "I'm not going anywhere." "Sleep." He settled but then sat up. "Oh, wait here." Izuku quickly shuffled out from under the blankets and opened the flap of the tent. Hitoshi scrambled to get away quickly and pretend like he wasn't just eavesdropping or anything. Izuku rushed over to him regardless, and before Hitoshi could fully turn to face him, Izuku wrapped him in a tight hug. "Thank you," he whispered. Hitoshi wrapped an arm around him too and pet him with the other. "It was nothing. Now it's late, you should go to sleep. I'll see you in the morning." Izuku nodded and smiled up at Hitoshi before running back to the tent. "Good night," he quietly called out. Hitoshi could hear Katsuki grumble when Izuku returned inside. "And what was that about not leaving each other?" Izuku cheekily giggled. "Sorry, Kaken." The next morning rolled around rather quickly and Hitoshi wasted no time in getting out of bed. He didn't hear any commotion last night, but he still wanted to check on the two and make sure they were all right. He quickly tugged on some clean clothes and speed walked out of the room, finding the living room empty and the flaps of Izuku's tent still closed. Hitoshi neared closer and after hearing the soft breathing of them asleep, released the anxious sigh he was holding and made his way to the fridge to start on breakfast. Actually, what would Katsuki eat? Hitoshi really only had stocks of vegetables and fruits in the fridge, and considering he wasn't much of a meat eater himself, only a small plate of leftover chicken from a few days ago. But just as he began to sweat over the fact that he had essentially nothing to offer the large wolf to eat, he heard a rustling from the tent. As if the timing couldn't be more perfect, not. A spiky head of blonde hair poked through the flaps and out crawled Katsuki. He stretched his arms and legs, once able to stand up fully, then flicked his ears back, turning his head to face the man in the kitchen. Hitoshi slightly froze up when Katsuki started to walk toward him. "I want to talk to you," the blonde said as he closed the distance between them. "Oh sure." Hitoshi stammered nervously, shutting the fridge door and turning to face the near-approaching wolf. "Why do you have Izuku?" the blonde asked once close enough. The question caught Hitoshi off guard and he blanked for a second. Well, a friend of mine runs a veterinary practice and called me up one day saying that he needed me to look after Izuku. They're pretty underfunded there, so they didn't have the space available to house him anymore. Katsuki flicked his tail and narrowed his eyes. That it? Yeah. What other answer did he want? What do you want with Izuku now? I don't want anything from him. The only thing I want is for Izuku to be safe and happy. I'm not like the psychotic scum he's had to deal with before, believe it or not. Hitoshi defensively said, getting annoyed with what Katsuki was accusing. I'll be the judge of that. The wolf stepped closer to him, getting into his space so their faces were only a few inches apart. Izuku trusts you, so I'll do the same for now. But if I see one scratch on him, you're dead if Angie meet. Growled and Hitoshi glowered. So much for trusting him, huh? Before he could even respond, soft padding of feet caught his and Katsuki's attention. He didn't even hear the tent open, but still, a sleepy Izuku walked over, his eyes pretty much shut with one hand rubbing them. He shuffled over to the suddenly docile wolf and wrapped him in a loose hug, slotting his arms beneath Katsuki's. "Kakin, where'd you go?" He mumbled into the taller hybrid's shirt. "I'm just here, Deku." The wolf responded gently, a vast contrast to how he was when threatening Hitoshi a second ago. "I know that, I heard you guys talking about something in here." They both froze. "What did you hear?" Katsuki hesitantly asked, his tail anxiously swaying behind him. "Something about meat?" "I don't know," Hitoshi sighed and the wolf's shoulders sagged in relief. "We were just discussing what Katsuki was going to eat for breakfast." Hitoshi quickly saved and Izuku nodded, believing him completely. "Right." Katsuki agreed awkwardly. "Are you hungry?" Hitoshi asked after a silence and Izuku hummed a yes, slowly detaching himself from the wolf and shuffling over to Hitoshi to help him look through the fridge. Katsuki took note of how Izuku's hand attached itself to Shinsu's sleeve and his ears pinned back in annoyance. I have a bit of chicken if that's good enough for you?" Hitoshi called out to the blonde. "It's fine," he responded, and the man pulled the plate out, along with some other things. He set them on the counter and Izuku went to a drawer and took out 2 plates and 1 bowl, placing them where Hitoshi needed them. Pretty quickly the three's food was ready, Hitoshi with cereal, Izuku with fruits, and Katsuki with the chicken. They ate together at the table in silence, Izuku contently kicking his feet around and Hitoshi awkwardly looking anywhere other than the wolf, who was staring at him diligently. Luckily his phone started to ring and gave him a worthy distraction. The screen lit up and showed Kirishima's contact. Hitoshi quickly swallowed the cereal he had in his mouth and stood up to accept the call, moving into the kitchen so they could talk privately. "Hello." "Hey Shinso. How is everything going?" It's going good." "That's great. I was just wondering if Katsuki has anything to eat this morning. I totally forgot yesterday and I know you don't have the necessities for a dog hybrid. I can come to drop some things off if you'd like." "That would be good if you could. I've given him some chicken but I don't think it'll be enough." He'll survive. I'll be over in a few, hang tight." "See ya." Hitoshi ended the quick call and went back to the table, refocusing his attention on the 2 hybrids. Izuku was busy handing Katsuki some of his fruits, fussing that he didn't have enough to eat, and the wolf had no choice but to begrudgingly accept them, though his wagging tail gave him away. "Kirishima's gonna come over and drop off some of Katsuki's stuff, so you don't have to keep feeding him, Izuku." Hitoshi interrupted and both the hybrids turned to him. "But he needs more," Izuku insisted. "And he's gonna get more when Kirishima gets here. Now eat your own food." Hitoshi fondly smiled at the greenette, pretending not to notice Izuku sneak one more piece to the other, before going back to eating again. "What's with the clothes?" Katsuki gruffly asked from his position on the floor. He directed the question at Izuku but didn't care that Hitoshi could definitely hear him from his seat at the table. Hitoshi, feeling like he was being scrutinized for what Izuku was dressed in, tore his eyes away from his laptop and looked at the two, taking a sip of his coffee. Izuku sat above the wolf on the couch, legs folded neatly beneath him as his hands worked dutifully in the blonde's hair, playing with the strands and detangling any knots. Katsuki sat cross-legged beneath him, leaning his back against the furniture, relaxed. It was a cute scene, other than Katsuki's side-eyed glare pointed at him. The attitude on this wolf was unreal. "They're stuck online," Izuku responded happily, though it was obvious he didn't know exactly what that meant, content with putting his trust in Hitoshi's previous excuse. Katsuki snorted sarcastically. "Why doesn't he go out and buy you something in an actual store then?" Hitoshi's eye twitched at the obvious judgment. Sue him for not wanting to go out. Online shopping is usually more convenient and he doesn't have to deal with people. So what if the wait is a little longer? It's not gonna kill them. I'm not sure, but I don't mind. These are very comfortable." The bunny explained, more focused on picking at the wolf's spiky hair and making sure it was completely smoothed out and clean. Katsuki turns his head to face the man and Hitoshi tries not to be unsettled by its pointedness. "Got a sick thing for seeing him in your clothes or something?" Shinso would have sputtered if he wasn't getting used to the wolf's atrocious accusations. He glared, annoyed. "Not at all, I just didn't want to leave Izuku here alone while he was settling in." Katsuki's eyes narrowed at him and he turned back around. As small and inconsequential as it was, Hitoshi would take it as a win. "Right. A sick thing?" Izuku inquired with a tilt of the head, peering down at the blonde who looked up at him in turn. 1 minute acting like an offended guard dog and the next like an obedient puppy, it was enough to make Hitoahai scoff. "Nothing, just wondering if they were clean enough so you didn't catch any diseases." He answered easily. Hitoshi was ready to kick him out. "Hitoshi doesn't have any diseases, don't be mean." Izuku reprimanded lightly, swatting at his shoulder. Katsuki just let him, unbothered by the weightless hits and more so amused by the attempt at disciplining him. There was a knock at the door that startled them and Hitoshi quickly got to his feet, hoping to some greater being it was Kirishima, praying for some reason he needed to take the asshole-ish wolf away. Izuku shifted like he was going to get up and follow him but Hitoshi raised a hand. "It's probably just Kirishima with Katsuki's stuff, no need to stand up, Izuku." The bunny nodded and settled back into his seat, still looking over to the door and Katsuki did the same. Sure enough, when Hitoshi twisted the handle it was the redhead that stood in the doorway with a bright smile. "Hey man. I'm on my lunch break right now so I can't stay long but I'm pretty sure I grabbed everything he needs. How have they been?" Hitsuhai slightly deflated at the confirmation that he'd have to put up with the wolf for a bit longer but let him in politely. Izuku offered a small wave to the man in greeting. "Hey little guy. I hope Katsuki's been behaving himself." At that the wolf scoffed and turned back around, hunching his posture over in retribution. Of course he was behaving himself, he didn't need to be checked on like a child. Izuku cutely nodded nonetheless. Katsuki let out a huff of impatience, making Izuku turn back around. He let the blonde reach up and grab his hands to put them back on his head, wanting to resume the grooming and ignore the newcomer. Kirishima tried not to laugh at the dog's behavior and raised the bag he was holding up for Hitoshi to take. "It's not too much, just a few snacks and his daily vitamins and stuff. Oh, the meat he can eat raw or cooked, he'll tell you how he wants it, he generally likes to cook it himself. I tended to burn it so he learned how to do it. He just needs to take one of each tablet with water and food. I think that's all. Thanks for coming all this way." Hitoshi took the bag out of his hand and set it on the counter for now. "Nah man. Thank you for letting him stay. I got to head back to work now before my lunch break ends but I'll be sure to check in once my shift is over. See you later dude." Kirishima walked towards the door and opened it, leaving the apartment after waving goodbye once more. Hitoshi returned to the bag and started to unpack the packaged meats and containers. "Do you want something now, Katsuki?" he called out before he put the meat in the fridge. He heard the wolf stand up and took it as a yes, leaving everything for him to sort out. Katsuki made his way into the kitchen with his hair fluffier than ever and began inspecting the items thoroughly. He grumbled. "Where are your pans?" he questioned, walking over to the stove with one of the packages and rifling through the cupboards overhead. Hitoshi's sweat dropped when he just started pulling out cooking oil and various seasonings like he owned the place. Hitoshi pointed to a drawer and decided to just let him do his own thing, turning around to check on Izuku, who had moved to stand behind Hitoshi at some point. Good thing he was used to Izuku just popping up randomly, or he would have had a heart attack. Izuku looked up at him and then followed him to sit at the counter, both watching the wolf work. Izuku turned to him and gently patted his arm to get his attention. What do you do for work?" he asked curiously, and Hitoshi smiled. Izuku's never been curious about that before. In fact, he's never asked many questions about his personal life. Surely curious but never wanting to push or make Hitoshi uncomfortable with questions he might not want to answer. What makes you ask that?" "Well, Kirishima said that he needed to leave because he had work, but I've never seen you go to work, so I was just wondering." Hitoshi was going to answer him, but of course, Katsuki interjected. "What, are you a bum?" he called out, and Hitoshi felt his eyebrow twitch in annoyance. "No, I am not. I'm in between jobs right now, but I've saved up a lot so I can afford to not work. I've been offered a job at a moving company, so when they're back up for business, I'll work with them for a little while. I'm doing a course on criminology online, so soon I'll have an internship with the local police department, which will hopefully get me a better job." "Oh wow. Are you going to be a detective or something?" Izuku was looking at him practically with stars in his eyes, and Hitoshi felt pride well up in his chest. "That's what I'm wanting to be, yes." He smiled and Izuku beamed. A victorious feeling pooled in his chest when he saw Katsuki's ears pin back in annoyance. Katsuki plated his meal, and annoyingly, Hitoshi was impressed. He doesn't know how this wolf learned to cook so well, but he was envious. Perfectly seared and seasoned, garnished with some of Izuku's herbs he found in the fridge. He even made a small plate of salad for the bunny. Even more annoying when he dumped the pan he used in the sink and walked away, looking at Hitoshi smugly. Hitoshi decided to go and get Izuku's meds in the meantime. Thankfully, with Hitoshi's care, Izuku only needed to take his evening medication, his body now used to relying on actual food for sustenance rather than medication. The dosages were still strong, however, but a win is a win. When he returned, he saw Katsuki sitting on the stool next to Izuku, the stool Hitoshi previously sat on, no doubt on purpose. Hitoshi set the pills down in front of Izuku and got him a glass. "Get me one too," the wolf called out when Hitoshi was at the sink. "Right, the wolf took vitamins." Hitoshi groaned. "Can't you swallow them dry?" he grumbled. "You want me to choke?" Katsuki called back, digging through the bag for the container. "Of course not," he said, hard on the sarcasm. He begrudgingly got the wolf a small glass and set it in front of him. Izuku seemed to be concerned that Katsuki had to take pills as well, looking at the container and trying to figure out what he could need it for. "Why do you have to take it? You look healthy," he asked, hands fidgeting and busying themselves with pushing his pills into a line. Hitoshi's glad Izuku's nervous habits came in the form of neatness and order, rather than something harmful like nail biting or scratching. He's read horror stories about abused hybrids developing the habit of biting their fingers or arms when they got anxious, and he does not know how he'd deal if Izuku started doing that. "It's just a preference. I don't need them." Katsuki quickly fished out the tablets and gulped them down, crinkling his nose a bit at the lasting taste. Didn't even use the glass he made Hitoshi get for him. "Oh, well, that's a relief." Izuku sighed and picked up the first pill in his line. Before he put it in his mouth, though, he turned to Hitoshi and tilted his head. "Can I not take mine, Hitoshi? I would prefer not to." Hitoshi looked at the wolf. "You're a bad influence." Katsuki scowled and pointed his fork at the man. "Why does he still need them anyway? You not taking care of him or something?" "A few months can't reverse years of damage. Izuku, you're still healing. You have to take them if you want to be healthy eventually." "Like Katsuki," Hitoshi responded, surprisingly cool and reasonable. As much as he wanted to come back at Katsuki, Izuku asked a genuine question, and so he would give a genuine answer. Katsuki is only temporary, he reminded himself. Izuku is forever. That makes sense then, thank you, Hitoshi. He carried on, and Katsuki finally started to eat, instead of just using his utensils to insult Hitoshi. Once Izuku had finished his meds, he quickly pulled the plate Katsuki made for him closer, an absolutely delighted look spreading across his face. Another annoying thing, Izuku was so obviously happy that Katsuki had made something for him and the wolf was very aware of it, huffing smugly. It really didn't make sense how much Izuku loved this wolf. Nor did it make sense how much Katsuki hated Hitoshi just for simply having the bunny. It was actually dark out by the time Kirishima came to pick Katsuki up and Hitoshi was borderline worshipping his feet as he walked in. He's dealt with the wolf's antics for how many hours now? Too many, too goddamn many. As much as he loved seeing Izuku so happy, he couldn't wait to go back to it just being him and the bunny, without a grumpy bitchy wolf sitting in the middle and judging everything about him. At one point he was even getting called out on the cat sticker he had on his laptop, the wolf making some comment like, "No cats eat bunnies out in the wild. Didn't think you'd be such a fan of cats," or some nitpicky shit like that. Hitoshi of course responded by pointing out that wolves hunt more rabbits than cats do. He got growled at for that one. "Come on Katsuki, we need to go home." Kirishima tried but the wolf wasn't budging. A scowl was set on the blonde's face and he remained firmly seated, ears pinned back with his tail harshly thumping the wooden floor, obviously set off. Izuku sat above him on the couch again, though this time he wasn't playing with the wolf's hair, more concerned about the conversation the two were having. "You can't just live here." He tried again. "Why the hell not?" Katsuki barked out at him. "Because I'll miss you?" Kirishima knew that that was a stupid reason but it was worth a shot. Katsuki remained unfazed on the couch, flicking through channels without so much as batting an eye at the redhead, only glaring at the TV. "Alright fine. You can't live here because this isn't your home." Kirishima crossed his arms and frowned at Katsuki's disobedience. Kirishima was usually one to just let Katsuki do whatever, knowing that the headstrong wolf wouldn't listen to him unless he wanted to anyway, but Katsuki was acting like a brat right now. "That guy's incompetent. We'll take Izuku with us then," Katsuki announced, as if proposing an ultimatum. "That guy dash." Hitoshi began, offended at not even being referred to by his name. "Demon homewrecker is what Katsuki is." "Katsuki, seriously that was rude. Izuku's happy here, aren't you bunny?" Izuku nodded, though a bit hesitant to go against the wolf. He obviously didn't want to be separated either, but he didn't want to be rude, resigning himself to going along with whatever the outcome was. "Well, you can't wear the same outfit for 2 days in a row. Unfortunately, I didn't bring you a change of clothes." Kirishima sighed dramatically and Katsuki stilled. "They'll go back and get some then." "Oh, but what if I choose the wrong ones? And besides we don't have the right things for a rabbit, Izuku would be totally uncomfortable at ours." He continued and saw as Katsuki began to thump his foot on the ground in agitation. It was working. "That you're effing annoying." He growled out and slammed the remote down on the couch. Izuku eeped at the loud exclamation and Hitoshi sighed with a smile, knowing Kirishima had won the battle, though pathetic as it may be to get your dog to do what you tell it to. Katsuki stood near the door, arms crossed and posture hunched in anger. Around his neck was a leash and collar and Hitoshi could see his nose wrinkle up, obviously vexed at having to leave. Izuku stood in front of him, holding on to his folded arms, all the while staring up at him in worry. "Hey, are you sure you have to leave now?" He whimpered and Katsuki grunted, slumping forward. Izuku's eyebrows creased together at his response and his lip wobbled. He had really hoped that Katsuki would be allowed to stay, had really wanted the owners to work something out so they didn't have to be separated again. It was panic that he felt, panic and sadness that he'd have to let go and Katsuki would leave without him, again. "Sorry Izuku, but we need to go home," Kirishima gently said, feeling bad for the bunny. He understood what he must be feeling for both of the hybrids. Katsuki wouldn't act childish for no reason. He didn't want to abandon Izuku again, or what he felt was abandoning him, leaving him with someone that had the potential to hurt him like it has been in the past. From what Kirishima could tell, the circumstances in which the hybrids knew each other were not good, an unsafe environment where they needed to protect each other. "Beep dash," Izuku stuttered and Hitoshi felt his heart break more than it already has. "They can come again soon, Izuku. You can see him again whenever you want," he said, but it seemed that had the opposite effect. Izuku ducked his head down, pressing his forehead into the wolf's shirt and tightly shutting his eyes that were already brimming with tears. Katsuki wrapped him in a hug, glaring at his owner accusingly. "See, can't we go with them?" Izuku asked quietly, and Hitoshi shook his head. "I'm sorry, Izuku, but they've got their routine at their house and we've got our routine here, we can't keep them." Izuku shook his head in silent refusal, but after a few seconds he took a shaky deep breath and pulled back. Izuku looked down and sniffled. "You're right." Reluctantly, Katsuki's arms unwrapped from around Izuku and Izuku stepped back. The wolf just kept his eyes on the upset bunny with a soft gaze. "Thank you for having us." Kirishima bowed with a melancholy smile and Hitoshi bowed in turn, unable to shake the guilty feeling building up. "It was no problem, we'll do it again soon, yeah?" he said, hoping to lift his bunny's spirits. It didn't work. Kirishima nodded nonetheless and walked towards the door to leave. Katsuki had no choice but to follow. The redhead opened the door and stepped out. "Bye, Kaken," Izuku cried, and the wolf turned back around, noting the teary tone. "I'll see you soon, Deku," he said, and Izuku nodded, wiping his eyes. The door shut behind the two and Izuku turned to Hitoshi. "I'm sorry, Izuku." He extended his arms and Izuku walked into his embrace, sniffling all the while. He hid his head in Hitoshi's torso and just cried. "I didn't want him to go," Izuku whispered. "I know," Hitoshi said, softly carding his hands through Izuku's hair. "What if he doesn't come back again?" he whispered again. "He will, I'll make sure of it." Izuku didn't say anything else. He just held on to Hitoshi and quietly trembled. "It's getting cold, how about we snuggle up on the couch and watch a movie? Does that sound good?" Izuku nodded into his shirt,